Hello and welcome to the first trial Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland Local Medical Committee podcast. Hello one and all. Just to quote Charlie, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. As you know from my newsletters, unfortunately, at the moment I do tend to be giving more negative than positive news. So just going through the December's newsletter, the important information that is in the newsletter that we'd ask you to specifically look at is to complete our collective action survey, to opt out or rather not to sign up for the data sharing for Eclipse Live, and not at the moment to respond to the request for a list of patients for complex care. So just taking those three first off. We've been asking you to complete this short survey, and I know that all of us are really sort of surveyed out, but this is sort of quite important for the MC's point of view. We have absolutely no idea at the moment of how many practices are engaging, and therefore what sort of effect we're having. I mean, nationally, it looks like we as an area are doing quite well. From the heat map produced by the BMA, on an average practice locally is actually performing over 5 of the collective actions, and the highest in the country is 6.7. But we are above average, which is excellent. But what we don't know is which actions are you doing, which ones do you want some more help with, which ones are no one's interested in. Therefore, there's no point us sort of putting into any additional energy at the moment. So please, it doesn't take long to do. It is just a short list of questions. We have added a few things on the end, mainly about the newsletter, just to see whether we are sort of hitting the right tone with it. So please find someone from the practice to fill that in. Thank you. The next two, the ICB have requested a data sharing agreement for using the Eclipse Live. Got one or two little concerns about it, but more importantly, as part of collective action, we asked practices not to sign up to this. And then finally, similarly, the ICB is asking for practices to provide information for an audit regarding complex care. Again, we have concerns about the audit. In particular, the email that came out doesn't seem to have been well thought through in what the ask is of practices, as well as giving too tight a deadline. Until the MC has had a chance to meet with the ICB and discuss complex care, I would be grateful for, again, practices not to involve themselves. So turning through to the rest of the newsletter, I'm not going to go through everything line by line. I do wish that that you do look through it. Now, with the newsletter, it's written as a repository of information, so I'm not expecting everyone to read everything. Look at it, see what seems to be important for you, what would help you, read those bits, but save it because it's there as a resource. It's there for you to look things up when you need to know. So we looked at minor surgery again. Now, minor surgery as a board, we're not quite sure at the moment of our strategy. We are actually liaising with other LMCs just to see whether there could be a joint approach about this. But just to remind you, you are subsidising every time you do a minor surgery, you are subsidising the NHS. And from my point of view, I do not think that's fair. I do not think it's fair, particularly as the ICB is well aware that practices are doing that. They are playing on your heartstrings. They are playing on you wanting to provide a service to your patients, not wanting for you to disadvantage your patients, even though they know that each time you do it, you are subsidising the NHS. So bear with us. The contract is one that you sign up to on a yearly basis. So we will need to get some information to you by April, by then, for a decision as to what to do next, which we will do. Next, turning to accelerated access to GP records. Now, we have written out to you before about this. I think that this is a disaster. It's a really poorly thought out piece of the contract, and it was part of the imposed contract. This was not with the support of the GPC. The GPC has always had concerns about sort of just turning access on for everyone. There is such a huge risk about data getting into the wrong hands, about data being abused, about it being used to be a risk for safeguarding. When I was involved in IT nationally, I actually insisted that there was a clause put into the contract which basically said that practice would never have to do it until such time as there was competent software in place which could allow you to have the appropriate controls to ensure that patients had access to what they need to have access, but actually didn't have access to what they didn't need to have access, and there were protections. The NHS England government decided to basically remove that safeguard from our contract, which I think is appalling. So that leaves us in a situation where you are being told that it's within your contract, which it is. But of course, our contract, like no contract, is allowed to force you to act unlawfully. And in fact, if you look at Regulation 94 and the GMS regulations, it actually very clearly spells it out that you have to have regard to other legislation. And under English law, other legislation has primacy over your contract. So you must, first off, comply with other legislation, even if that means that you're not complying with the letter of the contract. So the BMA issued advice that, of course, with any data processing, if you're using data which is high risk, then you must produce a DPIA. When you produce that DPIA, many practices have found, on thinking this through, that there are risks of inappropriate use of the data, of not being able to safeguard data and patients, which cannot be mitigated. If your practice has completed a DPIA which says that, unless you have now found a way of mitigation, then you are actually required, even by your contract, to fulfill the terms of your DPIA and therefore the requirements of the Data Protection Act. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop there and then we're just going to try and see whether this works and then we'll take it from there.